Hey everybody, and welcome to Jesse Weber Live. So tonight, the now 18-day search for Nancy Guthrie may be taking a turn to Mexico. As the FBI tells NewsNation, they have been in contact with authorities south of the border. And this is coming as we learn that investigators may have used polygraphs to clear suspects. Brian Entin's live in Arizona with the latest on that. We're also going to be covering the news that Playboy founder Hugh Hefner's alleged secret sex diaries filled with thousands of pictures of nude women could be digitized. There's a risk that it could be released out to the public. Oh, by the way, without the consent of those that he allegedly photographed. Some of those women may have been even underage. Well, I'll tell you what, legendary attorney Gloria Allred, she's going to join me live to tell us how she's fighting back with the help of her client, Hefner's own widow. And also, one of the biggest names in the Epstein files told Congress today that he was duped by the alleged sex trafficker. But considering the fact that his name appears over, 1,000 times in those files, the question is, was former Victoria's Secret boss Les Wexner, was he telling the truth? Lots to dig into there. Also, Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg got absolutely grilled in a Los Angeles courtroom today on if his company designed Instagram to be addictive to children. I will tell you the stakes couldn't be higher, because if he loses this landmark case, his company could not only be on the hook for so much money, it could force some big changes to social media. Parents, this is something you are going to want to hear. But we begin with the desperate 18-day search for 84-year-old Nancy Guthrie, which now may be expanding to Mexico. The investigation into who allegedly kidnapped Today Show star Savannah Guthrie's mom appeared to be slowing down after weeks without a suspect. But a source tells NewsNation that the FBI has now contacted Mexican authorities in connection with Nancy's case, which, by the way, could mean that this sprawling search may go international. Now, it is important to note that Pima County Sheriff Chris Nanos has said that investigators have no evidence to suggest that Nancy was taken to Mexico. So the feds may be just trying to cover their bases. Hopefully we'll get a little bit of clarity when I bring Brian on. But that being said, Nancy's home in Tucson is only a 75-mile drive from the Mexico border. And her being in another country, that would go a long way to explain why authorities are still coming up empty in spite of the hundreds of investigators combing the Arizona desert. Not to mention those helicopters scanning the area for her pacemaker signal. Now, back in Tucson, investigators are still sifting through the tens of thousands of leads that they have received since Nancy's disappearance. And the sheriff's department says they're still analyzing the DNA that was found inside Nancy's home. Though, to be clear, there's no word yet on whether or not there are any matches to CODIS, the FBI's DNA database. But we're also getting a better idea of how investigators are narrowing down on their list of possible suspects after the sheriff cleared the Guthrie family as suspects earlier this week, because apparently polygraph tests, better known as lie detectors, have been used potentially to clear people in this case. And the search, by the way, got a much-needed boost today after an anonymous donor gave Tucson Crime Stoppers $100,000 to beef up their reward for information leading to Nancy's whereabouts. So now that's on top of the $2,500 that was already being offered, and it joins the $100,000 that was being put up by the FBI. So it makes the total reward for information leading to Nancy's return potentially a whopping $202,500, though only time will tell if that cash will go to someone who has legitimate information and whether Nancy will come home. A lot of moving parts to this. Joining me live from Arizona, NewsNation senior national correspondent Brian Entin. Good to see you, Brian. So what is the latest on the ground right now at this hour?
Well, it's quiet here outside Nancy Guthrie's house. There's still a deputy here watching tonight, but the big developments came really from the sheriff's office. News that we confirmed that authorities here, the FBI, are now communicating with officials, with law enforcement in Mexico. The sheriff has said several times that he doesn't believe, or he doesn't have evidence to support that Nancy Guthrie is in Mexico, but he also doesn't have evidence to say she's not in Mexico. And it's interesting now that there are actually these communications happening between FBI, Mexico authorities. Is there some new piece of information that they have? We don't know, Jesse. I've been told all along by my sources that there's no sign that this is a cartel job. But that doesn't mean that whoever took Nancy didn't take her into Mexico, because it would obviously be easier to hide someone in Mexico.
By the way, one thing to think about with Mexico is we know with Nancy Guthrie there are health issues here and that she needed vital medication daily. You go to Mexico, potentially, the people who took her, they'd be able to get meds much easier than back in the States, right?
Absolutely. You can get anything without a prescription for the most part, Jess. You just go across the border. You see the map here, 75 miles away, an hour and a half, very easy to cross in. And the first thing you see, it's in Nogales, and I've been there, the first thing you see when you cross the border there are a ton of pharmacies, because Americans go over there to get medicine because it's cheaper and you don't need a prescription. So yes, it would be much, much easier. And it's easy to get into Mexico. It's much harder to get into the United States now, obviously. There's actually checkpoints along the highway when you're going from Mexico back into Arizona. But to drive into Mexico, so a lot of times they don't even check. You just drive right in.
Do you know when they contacted, or when the FBI contacted Mexican authorities? Is this something we're just learning now, or they just contacted them today?
We're just learning about it today. My sense is that they've probably been in touch for a while, just because we're so close to the border, the proximity. And the FBI in the Tucson area works with the Mexican officials a lot. So I'm sure they've been talking back and forth, but we just found out about it today.
I hope they were talking about this for a while, because you and I covered when that initial person was detained at Rio Rancho, which was right by the border, and we were having a conversation. Is this an operation where Nancy had been moved to across the border? We were having that conversation a week and a half ago. By the way, do you know if Border Patrol's involved right now?
So we actually have an interview with them tomorrow, by the way. They have been involved. Their Bortec unit, which is specialized, has helped with the search and rescue. They don't seem to be involved with the investigation at this point in terms of, the criminal part of it, but they have helped with the search.
I got to ask about the polygraph test. Sorry to do a 180, but I got to ask about these. Now, I understand that we have no idea who has been questioned using polygraph examinations, but here's the part that immediately jumped to my mind. You and I both talked about this. At first, Sheriff Nano said last week that he couldn't officially clear anybody from the investigation when asked point blank by Elizabeth Vargas about the family. He said, I can't clear anybody. It's impossible if you clear everybody. They cleared the family this week. Is it so outside the realm of possibility to believe that they were given polygraphs, or members of the family were given polygraphs over the weekend?
No, I think that's probably likely, Jesse. My source confirmed to me today that people are being cleared in this investigation with polygraph tests. There's been a lot of DNA swabs happening, but the polygraph tests are part of it. The sheriff came out and said officially, which is rare, but he said that the Guthrie family, the siblings and their spouses have been cleared. So when you connect those two things together, I would assume some of them took polygraph tests. Lie detector tests, another word for, they're not always admissible in court. I mean, you know that better than me. You're the lawyer here. But law enforcement uses them behind the scenes. FBI does it all the time when they're trying to narrow down who might be involved in something.
Yeah, we're actually going to bring on a former FBI certified polygraph examiner to talk about that in a minute. By the way, you and I had quite the Friday night. We were covering this SWAT raid where multiple people were detained. My understanding is they're speaking out. We're hearing more about that. Any information about what happened to those individuals or their connection to the case?
So they were released, which we've known. There have been no arrests. As recently as yesterday, when I spoke to the sheriff, he said that they're still going over the evidence, and we've talked about this. It was a federal search warrant. So there was something in that search warrant that caused a judge to sign it. So it's still ongoing. I'm not totally moving on from that yet, based on what I'm hearing. I know they've got electronics. I know they searched the house. I know that some of the people who were questioned have extensive criminal histories. So we're just going to have to wait and see. But there have been no arrests, and they were detained and they were all released.
Real quick, Brian, TMZ got another note today. I heard Harvey Levin on multiple programs to say there was a level of sophistication to this. It appears maybe legitimate in his eyes. I don't know. What are you hearing about this letter that TMZ received?
Yeah, I mean, look, the investigators here on the ground don't seem to talk about these TMZ letters very much. I don't know. I think they have to investigate them, Jesse, just like they have to look into every lead. But my sense here on the ground is that they are not necessarily connected.
See, that in and of itself is very interesting. That in and of itself, that they're not talking about it, from what you could see, maybe goes to a way of how legitimate it is or how seriously they're taking it. I think that's
I tried to talk to the sheriff. Yeah, I tried to ask the sheriff about it yesterday. He just kind of brushed it aside. Yeah.
Either he didn't want to reveal anything about it or he doesn't think it's legitimate. All right, Brian Entin, thank you so much. Great reporting, as always. All right, so as I mentioned, I want to dig a little bit more into Brian's reporting on the use of polygraph tests in this case. So joining me right now is George Olivo, a 22-year veteran of the FBI, a certified he looks 22. My gosh, look at this face, amazing. A certified polygraph examiner. He's also famously tested Casey Anthony's parents, Gary Coleman's ex-wife, as part of A&E's lie detector, Truth or Deception last year. Again, face made for television. Okay, is it common to be using polygraph tests in a case like this to clear people? I'm not even talking about it being used in a court of law, which we'll get to, but just to clear suspects. Is that common?
It's very common to use the polygraph as an investigative tool at this stage because investigators want to know if they're going down the right road or if they're headed down a dead end. So it's a good investigative tool.
You know what I'm going to ask you now. Are these reliable, right? Because my understanding is they're based off of physiological responses like heart rate, blood pressure, and you could have somebody who maybe is nervous, right? Or somebody's anxious. Doesn't mean there's deception, but I'm not the expert. You tell me, how reliable are these tests?
Well, let me begin by saying that the government does not use investigative tools that fail randomly. So they've been using polygraph for a long time. Legitimate polygraph is reliable if it's used correctly, and appropriately during the investigation. Now, when we talk about, I get a little nervous when we're talking about using the polygraph to clear someone. I'm not sure if it's just me getting caught up in the semantics, but you never want to rely on just one single investigative tool. That would be an improper use of polygraph if we were to use it as the final verdict in and of itself. Polygraph should be used as one piece of the truth puzzle.
I'm glad you mentioned that. By the way, from a legal point of view, sometimes courts may not admit them because there's not a scientific consensus on the reliability. There is even Supreme Court case law about that. But you tell me, how would you know? Let's say you interview somebody in a case, and I hear you. I hope there's additional information to rule somebody out. But how would you know if their answers, again, were a sign of deception or they were nervous or something of that nature, or maybe they're able to beat it in some way? How can you tell that?
Well, we can talk about that. There's two parts of that. Those are two good questions to talk about countermeasures, about being able to beat the polygraph exam. We can deal with that. But first, I'll deal with how do you know if somebody is lying or not? Because and most people know that it's not really what we would call a lie detector. People ask, does it detect a lie? And the answer is no. Probably better, we want to call it a stress detector. And so it's a known medical fact that when the body is exposed to stressful stimuli, it's going to react in certain ways. And for most normal people, getting caught in a lie with consequences, that risk of exposure, is a stressful stimuli. But the rub, and like you rightly pointed out, the rub is that every lie is a deception indicator, but not every stressful reaction is a lie.
Right. So how can someone train themselves, maybe I don't even know if they have to train themselves, to provide, let's say, deceptive answers to lie and not be picked up on it?
Well, that's, I'm not going to say it's impossible, but it's very difficult. I mean, you really have to thread the needle in the dark to do that because you have no idea what the examiner's looking at. And if anything looks manufactured or controlled in any way, then what people don't seem to realize, and which I don't think I've ever heard talked about, is the trump card that every polygraph examiner has is that if we're not comfortable with the data, if it looks somehow outside what's normal, we can say that test is invalid. We can just say that it's a no opinion test, and we'll either do it again or try something different. But you don't have to accept the data just because numerically they may have a passing score. If something looks suspicious, and especially with the FBI, very well trained in picking up on countermeasures, then we can stop the test, or we can start over, or we can call the person out on that.
And real quick, what kind of questions are they asked, and how long is a polygraph examination?
Normally, a polygraph examination takes about 2 hours, maybe less. It depends if the person's more talkative. The point is to get information. So there's basically 3 parts to the polygraph exam. There's the pre-test interview, the actual in-test where we conduct the exam, and the post-test interview to go over results and reactions and figure out, what else we need to know. So it takes about an hour and a half to 2 hours, maybe a little bit longer. The actual in-test, the part that you kind of see on TV where the person's connected to components, answering questions, that's probably doesn't last more than about 30 minutes.
Interesting. No, I'm so glad you mentioned that last part. I can't tell you how many cases I've covered. You have an interrogation room, and they're read the results, and the reaction from the suspect can arguably be more telling than the questions itself. So I'm really glad you cleared that up.
Absolutely.
Obviously, we don't know what's going on behind the scenes, but important to have some context. George Olivo, thank you so much for coming on, and good luck on your 23rd birthday. We're really looking forward to it for you.
Thank you very much.
You got it.
Good deal.
All right. So, a secret sex diary, thousands of nude photos of women, some dating back decades. Well, I'll tell you what, now Hugh Hefner's most private scrapbooks are at the center of a major legal fight. His widow is trying to stop what she fears could become their release, and she has turned to Gloria Allred for help. The legendary civil rights attorney joins me live next. Playboy founder Hugh Hefner built an empire on sex, made his fortune off photographs of women, and he turned womanizing into a global brand. But now, years after his death, his widow is calling for an investigation into her husband's foundation for allegedly possessing around 3,000 of Hugh's personal scrapbooks and a diary that she claims contains thousands of nude images of women, including herself. And the key there is personal. It wasn't like this material was ever published for Playboy. Crystal says that those scrapbooks contain intimate images of scores of women dating back to the 1960s, taken before, during, and after sex. The material also allegedly include Hugh Hefner's personal diary with the names of women, the sex acts they performed, and other highly personal details. And Crystal says that her main concerns are that some of these images may include girls who were underage at the time, or adult women who were intoxicated and couldn't consent. Now, Crystal Hefner claims that the materials were being digitized by the foundation. Obviously, that raises concerns that they could be leaked or distributed. And she also says she doesn't know where or know exactly where all of the materials are being stored. But to be clear, the foundation hasn't publicly said it plans to release the materials. Crystal, a former playmate and Hefner's third wife, also says she was removed as the Hugh M. Hefner Foundation CEO and president on Monday after raising her concerns. And she has since hired high-profile attorney Gloria Allred and filed complaints with attorneys general in California and Illinois. They made the announcement at a press conference yesterday.
Crystal did not consent to having her intimate images stored by and accessible to the foundation. And we believe that many of the other women and or girls depicted did not consent either.
And the great Gloria Allred joins me now live. Gloria, it's so good to see you. Thank you so much for coming on. Look, I want to get to this in a second, but I cannot have you on without just quickly getting your opinion on something that happened today. Major development, including Jeffrey Epstein. So you had billionaire retail mogul Les Wexner testified before Congress. We're going to talk about it a little bit later on. Said he was duped by Epstein, knew nothing about his crimes. You represent several Epstein survivors. Your reaction to Les Wexner?
Well, let me just say, I would like to know why no one in Congress has contacted me knowing that I have said on many programs, and my client Alicia Arden has said for years on many programs, that she filed a police report against Jeffrey Epstein in May of 1997 in Santa Monica, California, which is where I am right now, and that they never prosecuted him. And she wanted him prosecuted. The point of this is he told her that is Epstein did, that he was a representative of Victoria's Secret. So she went to the hotel because she was told that she would be interviewed as a possible model for Victoria's Secret. Victoria's Secret is owned by, or was owned by, Les Wexner. My question, which I'm now asking publicly for the first time, is, did the Santa Monica Police Department or the city attorney or the district attorney in LA County contact Les Wexner and ask him any questions? Was Jeffrey Epstein, for example, truly a representative of Victoria's Secret, Les Wexner's company? If he was, Les Wexner, did he believe or have reason to know that Jeffrey Epstein might be putting his hands on persons who were being interviewed to be a model? And did he know that Jeffrey Epstein was doing that with the name of his company in a hotel room in Santa Monica, California at the Shutters Hotel? Did they ask? If they didn't contact Les Wexner, why not? And if they did contact him, what did he say?
That is a totally fair series of questions. And I will tell you, after his testimony today, I imagine the conversation is going to continue, and hopefully they reach out to you to talk about this. But thank you. Okay. I appreciate you mentioning that. I do want to get back to the Crystal Hefner for a second. So, A, I have two questions for this. A, how do you know the foundation may be in possession of these materials? And B, what makes you believe the foundation could potentially digitize them? And of course, as I mentioned, that could lead to the release.
Well, the foundation has indicated and not disputed the fact that they are in the process of digitizing the 3,000 personal scrapbooks that were kept by Hugh Hefner. Again, thank you for emphasizing the nude photos in these scrapbooks were taken either before, during, or after sex. And our concern is we don't know if the women consented, signed a release, knew that the photos were being taken. And our concern is whether any underage girls in those photos, because, of course, legally, they can't consent. So that's one thing. They've admitted it. As to the sex diary that Hefner kept, or sex journal, in which he did indicate who he had slept with, and even when their menstrual cycles were taking place, and the kind of sex that he was having with them, that is a big concern of ours. Right. And again, we don't know if underage girls were noted in that diary. The foundation has indicated this week to us that that diary is not being digitized. It is, but they have not acknowledged that they have it. But just if they have it, it's in a secure place. Mm-hmm. She has been excluded from having access to either the diary and the scrapbooks. So she can't be sure where they are. But she has seen some of the scrapbooks. She has seen that diary. She knows they exist. But why does the foundation say they're not digitizing the diary if they're not admitting that they have the diary? And where is it? Because she has been denied access. She can't say for sure where it is.
Real quick, Gloria, we have to wrap things up. I just want to know, I know that you've called on the attorney generals of California and Illinois to investigate this. Any word back on what they're going to do?
Well, not yet. We had to mail, as opposed to email, snail mail, the complaint to the California Attorney General yesterday, Rob Bonta, which we did, certified mail, so we expect to get that postcard back that it was delivered. In reference to the Illinois Attorney General, we did file that online because you could do that. Right. And we did get confirmation back in an email that they received it. Okay, well, I would love to have you back on as this progresses. Thank you. It's an important story, and really appreciate you coming on my show. Good seeing you, Gloria. Thank you so much. Bye-bye. All right. So, by the way, we reached out to the Hugh M. Hefner Foundation for comment. Haven't heard back. All right, coming up, a rock icon, a ruling of suicide,
But now a former Seattle police captain says the case was botched, may have been staged, why he thinks it doesn't add up, and why he thinks Kurt Cobain's death should be reopened. It's next. A retired captain from the Seattle Police Department is raising new questions about the death of Nirvana frontman Kurt Cobain, claiming the case was botched and possibly staged. Neil Lowe, who spent 50 years with the Seattle Police Department and was asked by his chief to audit the case in 2005, says he believes investigators didn't properly treat Cobain's 1994 death as a potential homicide. The King County Medical Examiner ruled the 27-year-old's death a suicide at the time, but Lowe says physical evidence, quote, doesn't add up, pointing to what he describes as anomalies in blood evidence, the severity of the shotgun wound, alleged inconsistencies between autopsy and police reports, including missing notes, conflicting details about events that led up to Cobain's death. And remember, this comes on the heels of our previous reporting here on the program that a private forensics team already saying they believe this could be a homicide. Neil Lowe joins me exclusively now. Neil, thanks so much for coming on. You say the physical evidence doesn't add up. Why do you say that?
Well, that's correct. I started looking at this case in 2015, and you don't need the reasons for that. But I watched a documentary, and I saw things that like, oh, I didn't know that, because I had thought it was a suicide when I audited it in 2005. But, you know, everything looks in place. The missing shotgun is there. And so I went on my merry way until I saw a documentary in 2015 and changed my mind. But I need to look at this, and I did. And I approached it when my publisher asked me to take a look at it with the idea, if it's a suicide, there's no story here. I'm not gonna go with it. But when I looked at it, things that stuck out was the huge amount of heroin that was in his system, the suicide note, which with my detective experience, I had some experience with notes, and this is two different hands. And there was that unsubtle comment in there about do this for Courtney, and which was the same thing that was in the note that was found on the stairs. You know, you should be ashamed of yourself for sneaking in here against Courtney. It's his house. He can sneak in at any time he wants. What is this? This is Courtney. Courtney's writing this. She wants to make herself look good in the best light. So I didn't like that. And the shotgun blast to the head, I thought, was more than gratuitous. It was, here he is in a garage. His beat up piece of crap Volvo is in the garage below him. It still can start, even though somebody flattened the tires. And I thought, well, you know, if he was going to commit suicide, somebody peaceful like him would probably, you know, they might have shot up with heroin, certainly not the amount that was found in his body. From what my experts tell me, somebody would have had to have helped him and used a crock pot to cook that much heroin and get it in his body. And then he wouldn't have been functional enough to button his sleeves, fold up his fit kit, put it away, and do what he had. Those would have required.
How do you think investigators missed this?
Well, it started, I was a lieutenant in the South Precinct, and we got a note for our roll call boards, purportedly from Kurt's mother, saying that she was afraid he was in Seattle and might kill himself. So we were on the alert for that when 2 days later they find his body, and it came out of that room when the public information officer's coming down the hill with the medical examiner right behind her, and she stops and says, it was a suicide. There's a shot, you know, he shot himself in the face with the shotgun, blah, blah, blah. And there's a note. And I said, well, you're not qualified to make that statement. What do you know about forensics and the note? Did anybody certify this? From our position in police work, you don't announce this death like that to the news media, because Kurt's widow should not have known about it at this point, and she shouldn't hear about it on the national news, which is what happened.
I hear you. I hear you. Just to let you know, it came out. Seattle PD said they're not reopening the case. Real quick, what do you think about that?
I think that's the old party line. We're just going to stick with what we got. Even though nobody's there anymore from the time that it had been there, yeah, I think they're just afraid it's going to look bad for themselves. I think to clear the air, they should have maybe blue ribbon investigators, somebody they trust, go through and look at the case and come out and say, okay, I looked at it. I looked over everything. There's a perfectly logical explanation, but I don't think that's going to happen. I question. The other thing was no blood on the hand that was supposedly holding the gun barrel.
I heard about that.
Okay, so why wouldn't that be? You know, I don't know how much you know about. Shake a bottle of Coca-Cola.
Yeah,
put it in your mouth.
I hear you. I hear you.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what. Fortunately, ran out of time. I could talk about this for another 20, 30 minutes. Maybe I would love to have you back on. Neil Lowe, thanks for taking the time to explain a little bit more about it. Appreciate it.
All right, you're welcome, Jesse.
All right. Here's a question for you. How does a high school teacher turn into a man with a private island, a private jet, and global power? Some lawmakers say, follow the money. And they say it all leads to the man we talked about before, Les Wexner. So, was the Victoria's Secret billionaire Jeffrey Epstein's piggy bank? Or is that fiction? We're going to break it down. Fact or fiction? Next. One of the most powerful and mysterious figures in the Jeffrey Epstein saga is back in the spotlight. Les Wexner, the billionaire founder of L Brands, the man behind Victoria's Secret, Bath & Body Works, The Limited. He was questioned by the House Oversight Committee today about his long and very complicated relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. Why? Because for years, investigators have asked one simple question. How did Epstein get so rich? And many roads lead right back to Les Wexner, who was reportedly mentioned in the Epstein files, that library, more than 1,300 times. So was Les Wexner Jeffrey Epstein's financial backer, his piggy bank, or just another man who says he was deceived? So tonight, it is our fact or fiction. First, the island and the ranch. Now, Wexner has acknowledged visiting Epstein's properties, including Little St. James Island in the U.S. Virgin Islands and Zorro Ranch in New Mexico, but he says he never witnessed any criminal activity and had no knowledge of abuse. Verdict, fact that he visited. Fiction, that there's public proof he participated in or knew about criminal activity. Next, did he cut ties with Epstein in 2007? Well, Wexner says he revoked Epstein's power of attorney in 2007, removed access to accounts, never spoke to him again. The record confirms the formal break in 2007, but released documents show at least one email from Wexner to Epstein in June 2008 after Epstein's Florida plea deal on solicitation of prostitution charges, where he wrote, quote, "All I can say is I feel sorry. You violated your own #1 rule. Always be careful." Verdict here, mostly true about the formal split, but not a perfectly clean communication break. Next, was Wexner Epstein's primary source of money? Fact, Epstein managed Wexner's personal finances for more than a decade. By 1991, Wexner gave Epstein full power of attorney, sweeping control over his wealth. And investigators have identified over $1 billion in transfers and stock and assets connected to the two men over time. Now, Wexner says Epstein stole several $100 million from him and returned about $100 million in 2008. So the verdict on that? Fact that Wexner's money and status were central to Epstein's rise, but fiction that there is public definitive proof he knowingly funded Epstein's criminal activity. Next, did Epstein use Victoria's Secret to meet models? Now, there are multiple accounts that say Epstein invoked the brand to attract young women. Wexner's side says he confronted Epstein about it and forbade it. Verdict, fact that Epstein used the brand name, fiction that there is public proof Wexner directed or approved it. Here's the bottom line. Without Wexner's money, his trust, his social credibility in the 1990s, Epstein likely does not become the global fixer with a private island, a private jet, extraordinary access. But there is still no public evidence that Les Wexner knew about Epstein's sex trafficking crimes or alleged sex trafficking crimes. And yes, the financial entanglement is real, but what he knew and when he knew about it, That is what Congress is now trying to find out. I want to bring in Dave Arenberg. He's a lawyer and former state attorney of Palm Beach County, Florida, and my very good friend. Good to see you so much. Okay, here's the thing I'm thinking about it. I looked through the Epstein files, and they say that there was even, FBI was thinking maybe Wexner was a co-conspirator, but they said there was limited evidence of his involvement. The question is, and I'm confused about, how did he not know that all this money was being taken away from him? Why didn't he do more about it? Unless the allegation is he didn't want to raise red flags. Maybe Epstein had something on him. I mean, that was my takeaway.
Jesse, good to be back with you. Well, in today's closed-door deposition, he apparently said that Epstein siphoned away around $1 billion from him. How is that possible? You're a billionaire. You must be good with money. How do you not know that someone is stealing $1 billion from you? So I can't wait to see the deposition transcript. But that email that you mentioned from 2008, I think it's very telling. It says you violated your own #1 rule, always be careful. Does that sound like someone who knew nothing? It sounds like someone who knew something. Now, whether that's criminal, I don't know. And he's 88 years old, so he's not going to be prosecuted. But he could be sued civilly. There are laws that extend the statute of limitations.
Explain that.
There's a federal law that allows for a very large statute of limitations where you can get under it because it extends it for many years. It's called the Federal Trafficking Victims Protection Act. And then there's, in New York City, something called the Victims of Gender-Motivated Violence Protection Act, where the city reopened an 18-month filing window. So, yeah, you don't even have to be the person who committed the sex acts. You just have to be someone who enabled it. And you know, Jesse, in civil court, you don't need to prove cases beyond a reasonable doubt just by a lower preponderance of the evidence.
Let me ask you this. So I agree in terms of today, there was no bombshell that says, you know, oh, this is charges are going to be happening tomorrow. This should further a criminal investigation. But you have Congress, you have members, both sides, who are actively pursuing this. They are not letting it go. Is there something from today, and I had Gloria Allred on earlier, who said there need to be questions about whether or not Wexner was ever interviewed. Is there going to be further investigation to him in some capacity, subpoenas into people he spoke to or did dealings with?
I think so. When the Democrats gain control of Congress, I think that's going to change everything. You saw that the big takeaway for the Democrats from this committee was that they were shocked that no one from the FBI interviewed Wexner, even though he was clearly identified as.
You believe that?
Yeah, I actually do. Why would he lie about that? Like, right? That's something that's easily disproven if the FBI did interview him. I believe him that no one had interviewed him other than the correspondence back and forth where he said he was told that he is not a co-conspirator. Now, we know from the internal stuff that he was identified as a secondary co-conspirator, but not a target. So I do believe that he never had that face-to-face interview with the FBI.
So we still have a question about whether or not he had any idea about what Epstein or Ghislaine Maxwell were seemingly up to. Again, I think it was important that he testified. It's pretty remarkable that he testified in an age of transparency. Look what the release of the files have been doing and may continue to do. Dave Arenberg, good seeing you. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Jesse.
All right, up next, tech billionaire Mark Zuckerberg was in the hot seat today, testifying in front of a jury about whether or not his company Meta knowingly tries to addict teens to their social media platforms. I will tell you, this is a one-of-a-kind case playing out in court right now. I have got all the details, especially for you parents out there, and my 2 cents on all this next. I'm as guilty of as anybody else, endlessly doom scrolling through social media on my phone, wasting away minutes when I could literally be doing anything else. Oh, and I put a 15-minute limit each day on Instagram, blow right past it every day. Anyway, here's the point. In a courtroom today during an unprecedented tech addiction trial, CEO of Meta, Mark Zuckerberg, had to testify in front of a jury if alleged addiction was by design and, even worse, deliberately targeted towards teens. Now, Meta, of course, is the parent company of Facebook and Instagram, and it, along with Google's YouTube, are the 2 remaining defendants in a case brought by a 20-year-old woman who claims that her early use of the platforms caused her to become addicted and ultimately led to her worsening depression and suicidal thoughts. TikTok, Snapchat, they've already settled. Now, the allegation is essentially that the apps were built like, quote, digital casinos. And then during his testimony, Zuckerberg was presented with internal documents that suggested the company should, quote, increase U.S. teen time spent on the apps, was shown an internal chart that stated, quote, if we want to win big with teens, we have to bring them in as tweens. So Zuckerberg said, look, things are being mischaracterized, that his platform was simply a valuable service, that people will just want to use it more, that's what's going on. And that if he intentionally created a harmful product, that wouldn't make sense because in the long run, he would lose users. It's about sustainability. And the defense also, by the way, blamed the plaintiff's mental health issues on turmoil, family issues. In other words, Instagram is not a substantial factor in what this young woman suffered. Okay, here's my 2 cents. Honestly, the biggest part, I can't believe we're here. Those internal memos presented by the plaintiff are exactly why a company like this might settle. Now, I don't know this for sure, but something tells me TikTok and Snapchat, they may have also had very similar memos to what Meta was sending out. And then you add on top of that an arguably unsympathetic witness like Mark Zuckerberg, a man known to perform more like a robot than a human. I'm surprised we're even seeing this in court at all. Did his testimony do more harm than good for his side? I'm not sure. But here's the part. Here's the biggest part. Let me be clear. This case, this verdict, will have massive ripple effects for tech companies, parents, and children all across the country. So definitely watch what happens with this one. That is all we have for you tonight here on Jesse Weber Live. Thank you so much for joining us. I'll see you tomorrow night. FOMO starts right now.